That's it. Let's see. Mandalore Wise for $20. Thank you very much. Something I may have missed, but has the prosecution proven that they were killed and not substantially long after the last unlock?
No.
Paul and Maggie may have been involved in a involved conversation, possibly explaining the ignoring the phones. So yeah, I mean, have they proved the time of death conclusively? I don't
know. And we'll never have a good time of death.
Can't like how much, Steve, maybe you can speak this. How accurate, what's the range that we can get predictably of a time of death, like afterwards?
They will not get a time of death to this kind of precision. We're talking minutes. No, even hours is difficult.
Right.
So
the medical time of death would be greater, like the estimate of death based on like liver temperature, that kind of shit, would be greater than what we know to be the case. I mean, 911 was called at 10:06 or whatever. I mean, so we know they were dead by then. We know they were still alive at 8:44 or whatever. So like liver temperature shit's not going to give you a smaller window than what the other facts already give us.
Okay, yeah, you can't say with scientific certainty it was within this 30 seconds. Like that's never. I mean, as far as probably our lifetime, that won't be a thing. Did you? I mean, but do you think we're going to get more of the medical examination evidence though? Like we're going to get more. Okay.
I do have a theory by why the defense might be upping the gruesomeness, because usually the defense doesn't want it. Well, because it goes to when they were saying he's a good guy, he loved his family, and they're supposed to say that's open the door. Well, and that goes to the anti-motive, that a guy that loves his family this much, and look, he's stealing everybody blind just so he can support his family, is not going to commit this kind of gruesome murder. So it's in the defense's interest to up the gruesomeness and violence and hatred behind it. In fact, the more that you can paint this crime scene as a crime of hatred, if the less it shines the light on the defendant. So I think that's why they were pushing that theory about he's a good guy, and if he's like my brother and he took care of the family and everybody's close to him, he's all about protecting his little tribe and his little family.
Right.
External people he can screw.
Right. I mean, just look at John Wick. John Wick didn't go this crazy until his dog was killed.
Exactly.
At least the dog had to die.
I don't know John Wick.
And I will put. I asked some of you guys. Some of you guys in the chat were asking me to put up a poll. So I'm going to do the guilty, not guilty as of now, right? So thoughts as of now for you guys in the chat. Go ahead and see that since y'all asked for it.
I can.
Yeah, you can vote. Anybody can vote. Everybody can vote. ISO
you have to
says
put guilty, not proven guilty, because a lot of people will say emotionally, I think he's guilty.
Okay, okay. I'll just say it's not proven guilty, people. When you're voting, it's not proven guilty. Vote that
the other part of this the financial crimes evidence that's problematic for the defense is the class warfare idea that you got a jury of just everyday schlubs like you and me. And then they're talking about millions and millions of dollars. And like, I'll tell you that little kid, the 33-year-old skinny kid with the mother housekeeper who died, who he stole for $1 million. That to me, I mean, that made me hate this guy's guts. I mean, I'm like, I want him to go away. I just don't want him to go away for murder unless they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But for the financial crimes, if I was a judge and that guy's testifying and he gets convicted, I'm maxing that kid out.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Maxing the defendant out who stole that from that little kid. He
stole from everybody. His brother, his best friend, everybody.
But who gives a crap about the bank? I mean, the bank is like, they're not sympathetic.
Yeah, fuck the bank. Nobody cares about the bank. They care about the friend who's crying on the stand about his like broken friendship, and they're like, well, this guy's a piece of shit. And
Exactly.
and then they see the little.
And even that guy can take the hit. I mean, that lawyer. He had $200,000 to drop into the account to cover himself.
Most people do not.
He's doing fine.
But the guy that's working at Hardee's with his little cap and working every day hard, and his own mother, his only child, and his mother falls down and gets killed. And I'll take care of you, son. I'm your fan. And then he robs him blind, and he's still working at Hardee's.
Oh man, I would be so pissed.
Oh God.
That one is.
There would have been an Arby's knife at the scene.
We have the meats. No, but seriously though, like I think the one thing about the financial crimes, to me, yeah, it's exculpatory. But what do you think about the jury, right? Because we're looking at it from a lawyer's perspective. Like, how do you feel the jury is going to look at that? Because most people would say, and I was talking with Vices about this. They say conviction 100% if the financial crimes come in, because the jury is just going to be like, look, this guy's a piece of shit. Even if he's not guilty of murder, he's guilty of these other things. So we think he's a bad guy. Conviction. I think a lot of other folks are convinced that if these financial crimes come in, it's 100% conviction from the jury.
I think it's why the defense went so hard on the moral aspect of this at the beginning, because I think if you listen closely to the state's opening, they keep talking about, if you understand the broader context, if you understand all the things that led up to this, they knew. They pretended during the trial that, oh, Your Honor, the door was kicked open and now we can bring all this financial stuff. But if you listen to their opening today in the context of what we've heard in the last week, it's obvious to me that they knew or believed they were going to be able to bring in his financial stuff the whole time, because that's the only thing, this abrupt fear that his thieving was going to be disclosed, that triggered his mania killing of his wife and son. That's all built into the state's opening statement. They don't say it explicitly, but you can see it now in context. And so I think they were planning on bringing that in from the very beginning. Without that, they have no reason for this guy to kill his wife and son. None whatever.
Right. And that's the thing I'm digging for in this case, is like, the thing that really, really hurts me is, give me a motive for him to kill his wife and his son. And showing that birthday video, I'm like, I didn't realize at first, but I'm thinking, like, he did not have this relationship with Paul. He didn't hate Paul. He wasn't estranged from Paul. For a father to kill their son, you need a damn strong motive, not just, hey, it's going to delay my case a couple days. That's literally what they're saying, is that.
And in fact, they wanted a continuance in his civil suit.
Right. And he was already going to get one because of his dying dad. So to me,
it's important to keep in mind that at the time of the deaths, this guy was still a lawyer. He was still a partner in that firm. Now we know, of course, he's been disbarred and all this. But at the time, he was still a guy capable of making, $5 million, $10 million a year in income. So if you're making that kind of income, in your head, you're thinking, well, shit, sure, I owe this bank $4 million. I owe these people that, but I can work that out. I can make that happen. I mean, it's feasible. Now, I don't think in reality he would do that. I think he's like a degenerate gambler. I think no matter how much money he earned, he would spend 10 times as much. But in his head, he would be thinking, hey, I've got the income to fix this. This is not like he'd already been disbarred. He'd already been thrown out of his firm. He had no way to solve this problem. On that day, when his wife and son were killed, he had a path to safety.
Yeah. In his mind, at least.
In his mind, right?
Yes.
Well, and the thing, I can understand burning through a lot of money. In fact, I believe the part about him burning through a lot of money. And when you're in a cycle of doing a shit ton of drugs, especially if you're doing coke, you're doing a high-end, high cost drugs. Though. What was it?
Opioids.
Oh, it's opioids. Okay, I could still see him blowing through a good amount of money on that, particularly. And then if he'd had some poorly structured business deals, sure, right? Like interest payments on those might be pretty high. And to me, it seems more likely that somebody that, is burning through a lot of cash at some point and having to, by the way, get those off the books loans from the banks is going to turn to some shadier sources of financing at some point. And those folks, when they come to collect, they don't give a judgment, right? They do what we saw in the kennels, right? That is more characteristic of me. What we saw with I think the super chat earlier was saying, the cartels, somebody who's off the books, that the killing looks a lot more like that.
Well, so opioids, they're not like cocaine type money. I don't see that, but I can easily see him getting in a pinch financially. And instead of going to a bank, his drug dealer says, hey, I know a guy that can give you $100,000. It doesn't even have to be on the books. It's just, so they gets $100,000 from a drug dealer. Man, if that drug dealer does not get his $100,000 and the 20% VIG back the next week, he will definitely come kill you and your family, because if he doesn't, he loses his entire business. I mean, you only survive by being feared and respected in that industry. So I can imagine, I don't think this guy was very smart. I think his great grandfather was smart. I think his grandfather was smart. I think his father was smart.
Yeah.
I think he's at the tail end of the bell curve for his family. He managed to make a lot of money from his family connections. It's a personal injury firm. It's very common. You can make a lot of money without being a very good lawyer. But I think he thought he was his progenitors and was living that kind of lifestyle that he couldn't actually support. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least to learn that someone offered him a 6-figure loan, and he said, "Oh, thanks, buddy. Yeah, I'll be happy to take that at 20, 30% interest." And then when he couldn't make the payment, it wasn't like his buddy bank that just wrote it off. They were like, no, MFer, we actually expect the money.
Andrew's coming up with another theory because I'm all bought into that's. I'm like,
no. This is a good one. No. The drugs is a great one because, like I said, and I completely believe that. That's kind of what I was hinting at is, there's somebody out there, like you said, who will just flip you $100,000 because they've got $100,000 in cash, right? They can't just drop it in a bank. I mean, might as well put it somewhere
and
give it to you
to launder it,
and expecting corruption out of you. Like, I want your influence when I call back, right? I mean, there's an expectation there, and all of a sudden
he's a lawyer.
What better way to really?
So here's how it works in real life. You need money. They say, "Oh yeah, we'll give you $100,000." So you take the $100,000. Maybe you even pay it back, and then they say, "All right." In a month, they come back and they say, because it's a good way for them to launder money, and they got a loan repaid. They say, all right, this month we're going to give you $300,000. And you say, no, I don't need $300,000. I'm good. They're like, no. You don't understand. You're taking a loan of $300,000 and then you're going to pay us back. And then it gets laundered as repaid debt.
Well, but it's also interesting that, and if you want revenge on him, you kill his wife and son and frame him for it. Golden.
Yeah. And you're done. And you're done. And you can even say, hey, I'll come for Buster too if you don't pay up, or give me.
I had another
that's always available.
The 8:44 p.m. Video where he's in the background, his voice in the background, and he's like, "Hey, Buster," that man does not sound angry at all.
Yeah.
So so the rage, passion, something was said and he lost it, to me is not consistent with that at all. So then we're left with the only other option was cold-blooded killer all the way, which is not consistent with anything either. So I'm not, I'm skeptical of all because I know this guy. The thing is, I've dealt with financial crimes and I've dealt with thieves. People are criticizing me a lot. I should say not a lot. Some people are criticizing.
No. That's I've gotten the pushback too, Steve. So don't worry about it. I've gotten the pushback. There's lots of people that push back on it.
They have it, but they're saying like, well, I'm saying thieves aren't murderers. It's like I've dealt with sex offenders. Sex offenders are segregated from the regular population, right? And they have their own little wing. You go into the regular population of the prison, and it's like wild. I mean, those people are yelling at you, "Hey, F you," and then they're making looks at you, they're laughing, they're hooting, they're threatening, they're violent, they're puffing. It's like a whole tribal dynamic, right? You go over to the sex offender wing, and they're all like hiding in corners, and they're all buttoned up like this, and they whisper and they point, and it's like a whole subset of personality that ain't those violent criminals. Those those violent guys, you put those guys, that's like they would be thrown like chickens to wolves. They'd get torn apart. But in their little manipulation wing, they've got the thing. But those sex offenders, they got a different dynamic. Same thing with thieves. People that this guy, I know this guy, I've dealt with him in my context, of the embezzler, the guy that's stealing the money, the guy that's like, oh shucks, he's the swindler. He talks his way out of anything. And then the victims are always like, he was just so charming. I never thought he'd be the guy to steal. Well, of course. The guy that you don't like, you're not going to give him your money. So I just, from my experience of dealing with these people, I don't see that type of guy being this double homicide, cold-blooded murderer. I mean, and maybe I'm off, but I mean, I'm just sharing you the best I have to express.
No, I like that because there are those stereotypes. They're generally true, right? Those things are generally true. And that's a very, very good point there.
And then it goes back to, we must have a very compelling motive to overcome that predilection.
I like this one. Seems kind of hard to believe a guy that's as hard as a roast marshmallow his own son. It's true. I mean, this guy, he seems, he's a tall guy. I think he's my height. But he doesn't seem like he's this grizzled psychopath. That just doesn't come off to me.
Right. I mean, the smallest, weakest people will murder people, but there needs to be a reason.
Sure.
And I just don't see any reason here.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, in fact, weak people are oftentimes the most dangerous. People that are strong and confident are not dangerous. Those people are working in it. This guy was powerful. So like I said, think about the guy that always admired the pretty girl from afar and had his dream. And then all this, he hates his family. I mean, that's a weak guy but he's going to come, a firearm. All of a sudden, he ain't so weak, is he?
Right. And this guy, keep in mind, this defendant, I mean, this is how strong he is in this context. He went to his local bank and asked them for almost $1 million loan, and they gave him the money
off the books
with no paperwork.
Off the books.
I mean, that's what he's capable of doing. So whatever financial problem he's been in, and he's been in a lot of them for many years, he's able to cover it. And then he has this tremendous income earning potential. And so when the prosecution talks about this guy's the last thread, and that's what it broke, and that's why I'm like, no, I don't see that. On the day his family is killed, he still has the income potential. He's still getting the money from his buddy bank. It's probably all corrupt. In fact, the CEO of the bank now has been convicted of financial crimes over this and other things. Of course, it was all corrupt, but he had the means. He had the tools to try to fix it. And he had a good reason to believe he could fix it because he'd been caught before.
And he's been doing it. And he's been doing it for 10 years.
He's always been able to wave it away. And all this money he spent on his family. They had their home. Then they had the beach house for his wife. Then they had the hunting property for his sons. Then they had the jets to Key West for family vacations. Right. All this stuff. He's not just stealing all this money to stuff it up his nose. He's spending it on his family and their lifestyle. That's not a good reason to steal money, folks. Don't steal money. But I'm just saying, there's no sign of he's doing it for his family. Where's the animus?
Right. And that's something that a lot of people can justify. That's the whole, if you steal a loaf of bread for your dying mother or something, like your sick brother, people aren't going to hold that against you. They're like, okay, this was a crime of necessity, right? Versus something that, and yes, it's not, this is beyond a loaf of bread. This is millions of dollars. But if he's putting it towards his family, people can say, okay, that motive does not link up with the motive to then go and kill his family that he's been doing all this thing for, going out of his way to protect. And then one comment here, Unilink says, there was a murder close to where I live, and the murderer gave his phone to his friend, so not to be close to the place of the killing. Not sure if it fits. Possible.
That's a reasonable suspicion in an investigation, but you don't prove someone guilty of a crime on that basis.
Exactly. The beyond a reasonable doubt is different than that. That requires more than that. Steve, I know you got to go soon.
When my son gets back.